Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello, girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's mindset and body image coach. If you haven't done already, please make sure that you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss another podcast, and tag me when you listen to it. As you helping spreading the word around, we can reach more women around the world. So make sure you press pause, give us a star review, which I absolutely love seeing. Where in the world you listening to a podcast? Is it on your walk? Is it at the gym? Is it in your bedroom? Let me know. With that being said, I'm chatting today with Georgie Collinson, who is Australia's leading anxiety therapist. Georgie specializes in helping people with high functioning anxiety. She's gained her recognition for her unique approach that focuses on the mind, the body, and the soul. With her background in anxiety coaching, clinical hypnotherapy, naturopathy, nutrition, all the freaking qualifications, she's been able to assist countless clients from all over the world through her online programs and through her highly popular Anxiety Reset podcast. And I'm so pleased to have you on today's episode with me. And I would love for us to start the conversation with what are some of the deeper reasons behind why anxiety occurs, how it shows up, and what are some tips for someone to deal with it.
Oh, thank you for that beautiful introduction. So, look, anxiety, if we could really sum it up in one word, I think the easiest way we can see it, we often like to see it as this pesky, inconvenient thing to just get rid of. And it's like, how can I get calm as quickly as possible? When the way that we view anxiety has a lot to do with how we end up managing it. And if we can start to see anxiety as a messenger, it's trying to help you, it's actually a friend to you, we will start to see a big change. So anxiety will pop up whenever there is something out of balance. And that can be, I suppose, sometimes unsettling for some people to hear, because we don't like to hear that there's something out of balance. We like to sometimes just be able to say, oh, it's just come out of nowhere. It's out of the blue. It doesn't mean anything. And I'm just going to push forward in my life. When any kind of symptom in the body is a sign of something out of balance. And the way that we tend to live our modern lives is often out of balance. You just have to look at the screen time, the lack of sleep, the pressure we place on ourselves, the survival mode so many of us are living in. So this is why this is so common. And what I'm talking about, often people say to me, well, that's just everyone. Like, I know so many people like this. Just because it's common does not mean this is healthy or normal. And so, yes, there is a lot of anxiety. There is a lot of anxiety calling us to slow down, calling us to listen in. And that message may be around your physical health. So it might just be saying, you know what? You need more sleep. We need to be eating three meals a day, balancing the blood sugar. It could be as simple as that. It doesn't need to necessarily be a big thing like you've got to quit your job and go through a big life change. However, often the women that come to me do go through those big changes, and they do it in the 4 months that we work together as well, which is pretty cool. Like, life just all of a sudden, this big shift happens, and we sort of go through that because that's just what needed to happen. So it could be that relationships need to shift. It could be that family dynamics need to shift, big boundaries coming into play. No longer wanting to play this same role that you've been playing your whole life in the family, or whatever it might be in your friendships, in your romantic partnership. It could be that there is a career change that needs to take place, or just some boundaries again with work that need to shift. And so often the perfectionism that's coming into this and underlying anxiety is an underlying, and it's often unconscious. Like, I didn't think I had an issue with this myself until I really delved into it and put my ego to the side and went, actually, it is there, we're seeking approval from our parents, and often one more than the other. And so whatever that unconscious sort of perception of this is the perfect way to live life, or this is how you're going to gain that approval, whatever that might be, we have absorbed that. We are a product of our upbringing, of our childhoods. And that is so much of what lays the foundation for anxiety as well. And whatever our own unique version of perfection is, will always come back to those messages we received. Even if it wasn't directly at you, it might not be like, you need to change your body or your eating habits, but you watched mum constantly dieting and constantly criticizing her appearance in the mirror. Or it might not be that your father said to you, you have to be really super successful, but you watched him be super successful, and you watched him be impressed by people who are super successful. And so that message got absorbed. I have to be super successful if I want that attention, that approval. So that's where I can open us up, Ziggy, and lay the foundations for what anxiety is all about, and particularly this high functioning anxiety, which is just the anxiety of, on the inside, it looks like on the outside, sorry, it looks like you've got it all together. People often don't know, but on the inside, it's just cycling thoughts, worry, churning in the gut.
I can definitely relate to all those symptoms, because too often, as you mentioned, from the outside, we look completely fine. We're happy as fucking Larry. But then inside you have like this deliberate, painful, like chest pain, or like your guts are misplaced and you're constantly going to the toilet and you can't hold it in, or those ruminating thoughts. Oh my God, been there, done that. And I would love for you to share your personal journey, because you mentioned just previously that you've experienced this yourself, and how did it help you navigate through anxiety with your own journey, but also becoming a leader in this field of therapy?
Yeah. So look, for me, I mean, in many ways, I didn't notice anxiety in my childhood until, I mean, it was there sort of in high school. High school worked for me, and I could play that game. I could play that system. I could shove knowledge into my brain and regurgitate it out on an exam paper. So in that way, I had that high achiever thing already going, needing to be popular, needing to look beautiful, needing the attention from the boys, all of that stuff, tick, tick, tick. So it was there, but then it really went into a whole other gear when I turned about when I was 19 years old, and my parents divorced, and my dad left my mum really unexpectedly. It was one of those things where, I mean, denial's very powerful. Looking back, there were signs, but at the time we were all just like, whoa, it was like a bomb just went off. And my solid rock of a foundation, my family that I thought were just going to be this unit of solidarity that I could depend on, just turned into quicksand in literally moments. And all of a sudden I lost that solid foundation, and it shook me to my core. And I was waking up every day with this sense of something's gone terribly wrong. This is not how this is meant to be. I was rejecting and fighting what had happened so much for probably years, actually, in the aftermath of that. Just, this shouldn't have gone this way. This is wrong, which, you know, creates so much suffering for us when we deny that. And so I went into control mode, and the perfectionism then just came out even more as a way of trying to find some security and safety. So it's funny, you'd think that I'd be trying to like fix my family or something, but it doesn't work like that. My mind went to, I'm going to get the perfect body. And then when I have the perfect body and I control that, I'm going to have love, and I'm going to attract the perfect partner and everything. And then I'll be safe and I'll be okay. So what actually started my interest in nutrition and health, and this is quite a common one, was an unhealthy obsession with food and nutrition. Because I already had the message that I could influence my internal state, my wellness. I could be a happier person if I took care of my internal world, the nutrients. I was aware of the food that going into my body, but it was unhealthy. I mean, it was at the point of like being anxious about going to cafes with a friend, or, you know, what am I going to what am I going to eat at this event, and saying no to things, and just feeling really, really, really controlling about food. I mean, I go to sleep at night just like ticking off what I'd eaten and thinking, okay, tomorrow I'll start again. And I failed because I ate that thing. It was just like, it sent anxiety to a whole new level. So there are definitely ways we can do the nutrition thing in a way that's not going to help our anxiety. And I'm so passionate about helping women. Often I'm mostly just undoing the rigidity of our diets. Like, even those who are struggling to have that balance, I'm just like, let's just flow with this. Your body knows what you need if you can tune into it. But what I was doing was controlling it all from my mind, and my mind was just saying, this is what it should look like. I was completely disregarding what my body was telling me. And what's really nice is when we do come back and connect to our body and trust our body knows what we need, and it will regulate what we need. So went into that, was binge eating, was throwing up, had bulimia, had orthorexia. And that was quite a cycle. I mean, I'd be going to nutrition lectures and learning all the nutrition facts, and then driving on my way home to the health food store, buying all the expensive like chocolates and things, binging them in my car on the way home, throwing the rubbish into the bin before I got inside the house, like these sneaky kind of habits were what one way I was coping. And it was just to stifle the anxiety. It was to stifle my grief about what I didn't want to feel. And so many people get stuck in this. I posted something about this on Instagram just the other day about the ways women cope with anxiety. Binge eating is one. Overworking is another. I was definitely good at that, burying myself in my work. Scrolling online. What else is there? Online shopping is another one. Oh, doesn't it just feel so good when you just buy some stuff, some new activewear, and then all of a sudden we feel so much better for a moment. And then the other one is alcohol. It's really common. That was never one big one for me, but it certainly can be for women. And so the journey went like that, kind of figuring out through trial and error what wasn't really working, and that, going harder and forcing and pushing harder is not how we work with anxiety and how we get the results. But I was always fascinated by everything nervous system related, anything about stress and anxiety, and what I was studying and learning. And then in my nutrition and naturopathy degree, and it just evolved into graduating as a naturopath and helping all kinds of women with all sorts of things. But I just loved the anxiety. And I was also noticing that when I would give someone a treatment plan and I'm like, here's all the things that you need to do, there are some people who just couldn't stick to it, that just couldn't love themselves enough to really do that. And I know what that was like, because there was I dealing with I'd been dealing with, like, I know all the information, and yet here I am shoving my face full of this food that, to try and suppress my emotions. There's something deeper going on here. So I had to learn further, and I went and studied hypnotherapy as well, a very specific kind of hypnotherapy called RTT hypnotherapy. It stands for Rapid Transformational Therapy. It's won multiple awards. It's an incredible modality. I absolutely love it. And the idea is that it's the most successful, most effective form of hypnotherapy. It gets results real quick. The sessions themselves, my sessions take anywhere from 2 hours to 4 hours with clients. I just sit with them until we get there, until it clicks. But it's really powerful. And that's what was missing. Like, I needed some way of dealing with the trauma and releasing that for people. I needed a way of shifting these deep patterns that just are unconscious in the subconscious mind, and a way to shift emotion. And I will say most of the time, it's just, I was a good crier my whole life. Like, I would let myself feel, but I wouldn't let myself feel to the depths of what I needed to feel. So I'd kind of cry a bit and think I was a good crier and a good feeler. But there's so much more we can hold ourselves in, so much more we can create space and patience for, that, if you've grown up typically, like most of us have, with that sense of, my parents are uncomfortable when I cry, or my emotions are too much for my family, we're going to suppress that and suppress what really needs to come out. And ultimately, so much of our anxiety, it's like a volcano filling with lava. And that volcano just gets to this point where it's so full because we're not releasing the emotion that it's going to erupt, and we're going to get panic attacks, or we're going to burn out, or we're going to get sick, or we're going to get depressed, or just that chronic anxiety of like, it's kind of like the eruption about to happen. It's just shaking full. So the more we can release our emotions and siphon it out on that regular basis, we're not going to get the pressure building up, that lava filling up in the volcano. We're not going to have these huge eruptions in our lives. So it's kind of exciting when the eruption happens. I know my clients don't enjoy it that much, and I certainly haven't in my life, but it's the breakdown that's actually the breakthrough. And it often takes that for someone to go, oh shit, like I really need to make a change. I can't keep going. I can't keep pushing. That's not working anymore. And so that's pretty much where I reached. It was just, this isn't working anymore. I need to make some big changes. And I learned to feel my anxiety. I learned to hold space for my emotions. I learned to tap into my intuition, jump out of the mind back into the body, and as well, finally able to really live and embody everything I was learning as a naturopath and a nutritionist, all that knowledge, just letting it, it's like learning a language. It became just fluent. I didn't have to think about it. My body, I knew the information, and then my body just wants to live that way. You know, I crave water. I naturally want to hydrate. I naturally want to eat my greens and my fiber and my protein and have regular meals and move my body when my body wants to move, depending on my cycle. And that's all taken a lot of deconditioning to get there, but we can so get there. And this is what I call being an anxiety master. It's just knowing what you need. It's knowing what that anxiety is telling you and embracing the call. I still feel anxiety sometimes. You know, I'm never going to lose it completely from my life. No one will. It's like a natural signal in our body that we need. And I'm so glad it's there, because it tells me too, like when I'm interacting with a human who is not safe for my nervous system, someone I don't feel comfortable around, like it's part of our intuition, our way of interacting with the world and keeping ourselves safe. So that's pretty much the journey.
As you've been talking, I'm over here like nodding my head going, yep, that was me. Yep, that is me. And I know a lot of our listeners are going to relate so much to it. And I also want to thank you so much for opening people's eyes to anxiety is not something that you should be ashamed of, because as you said, it's a symptom of the body when we are unbalanced. However, too often people look at anxiety as something's wrong with them. I need to fix myself. This is not okay. However, I'm sure you would agree with this, that too often with anxiety, we have to look from within. And this is where your expertise comes in. You know, people at the time are not wanting to face that discomfort or the resentment or whatever that's coming up in their bodies. However, we know once they actually reveal that pain and go through that motions, whether it's through somatic therapy, whatever, life starts so much better, because you're able to put that awareness into, why am I feeling so anxious? And like you said, you had that anxiety from a really young age with your parents' divorce, and then your body image issues, your eating disorders. It's like ticking all these things going, fuck, like this is why this is showing up. How can I start regulating myself? You also mentioned a really good point where through your experience, but also helping clients, is building that awareness, making them realize these things are going to constantly happen and we need to make a change. However, from my experience and from coaching, I also notice a lot of people who are afraid of making that change. And like you said, that it's the high achieving standard in their lives, whether they're wanting to be successful in certain areas, where they don't want to unfold what's actually happening inside of them, that discomfort. And I would love for you to share, what are some things that, in terms of treatment, I know it's very individualized to everyone, but something for someone to consider when it comes to navigating anxiety through the mind, body, and soul?
Well, I mean, first thing I want to say is just, you're so right about the fear of making a change. And on some level, I believe that there's just a natural process that people have to go through. We don't have to force someone to be ready. they will come to their readiness on their own. That volcano will erupt. And all of a sudden, it'll just be, there's no other choice. There's no other option. We can't keep trying the old way that doesn't work. The suppression doesn't work. The forcing doesn't work. And so that decision or that moment of I need to change will happen. And it can be scary, but it's also very exciting because a lot of people will come to me saying, I've tried everything. And often they've tried a lot of things, but have they tried really going deep into the subconscious mind, exploring their childhood? Sometimes a bit, but often not. And it's almost like we want to find the answer in our gut health or our hormones. We want to find it there because that's more controllable. Then I can just take a supplement and everything can be fine, and I can just keep going, and I don't have to make any of those scary big changes. So in terms of like a place to start, we have to look at how we relate to anxiety and how we understand it. And that's what, I mean, a really helpful resource and place to go would just be my book, The Anxiety Reset Method. It's available all over Australia. And this opens up this understanding. I talk about anxiety being more like a cat, that, you know, when you want to bring a cat closer to you, you can't just kind of grab at the cat. You have to understand how cats work. You need to just let the cat come to you. And there's a certain way that you need to scratch it under the chin and be with the cat. Anxiety is much the same. It doesn't work when we tell it to go away or we grab at it and we try and push it down. We really do need to listen to it. So essentially understanding that anxiety is like, I mean, I love a metaphor. I love using these examples. They're just so helpful. So I often talk about anxiety also being like a dog scratching at the door. And if you leave that dog, if you ignore it and you just kind of try and la la la, I can't hear the dog, and the dog's just going to get louder. It's going to start barking louder. It's scratching at the door. It's getting really distressed. This is what we mostly tend to do with anxiety. It almost builds more and more energy, more resistance, the more that we try not to listen to it, the more we try to pretend it's not there. If you open the door, you let the dog inside, you dry him off, he's going to curl up and go to sleep. Same thing with anxiety. If we say, hey, anxiety, what are you trying to tell me? And maybe there's a scared little child in here that just needs some love and some space and some compassion from you. We're looking for that often from our significant other, from our family members, from our friends. We're waiting for someone else, maybe even our boss at work, to say, you're doing a good job. You're good, like giving us that validation. But ultimately, we have to learn how to give that to ourselves, and we have to mean it, which is the tricky part as well, really leaning into and making that your new familiar. So it does start with a new way of looking at anxiety. I have a process called tuning in that I guide people through, and it's essentially starting to, you know, just for 1 to 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long thing, but just starting to notice that you can be with the discomfort, that you can be with that sensation of discomfort in your body for a few seconds, for a minute, and just kind of starting to test the edges there. It's kind of like when we go to the gym, we flex our muscles and we're doing weights and we feel that burn, right? Or you're doing some squats, you're going to feel your thigh muscles burn. And we kind of say, imagine if we all went, oh God, this is bad. Oh no, I'm going to stop now. This is painful, so I will stop. We're not going to get very far with our gym workout, but we've got such a deep belief, majority of us, that this is good for me. Yeah, bring on the burn, that we keep going with it and we kind of embrace it and we like it. We can do the same thing with our emotions. We can flex that muscle of, there's a bit of like discomfort in my belly right now. There's a bit of a like breaking feeling in my heart. There's a ball in my throat. I'm just going to let this open up and move through me, because I mean, just like muscles feel in the burn, it's like I'm going to let myself feel this discomfort in my emotions and let it release. And we start to get to this place also, just like a workout, you feel amazing afterwards. You get that euphoric high. You get the same thing when you have a big emotional release. You feel relief. So much of our anxiety is that stored up emotion that we're just not wanting to feel, and we haven't given ourselves permission to feel. And maybe even not, even if you want to, just not able to access at the depths because the subconscious blocks it, because the subconscious mind is still 5 years old saying, oh, but remember that time mum freaked out and said, oh, why are you doing this to me when I was crying? And I don't want to do that to people because I'm a burden to them. So I've got to keep this in. So there can be some stuff that we need to look at that deeper level. And that's why majority of us do need to do that deeper exploration to really start to create a big shift. But that's a place to start, is just seeing, can I close my eyes, put on some meditation music, do what you need to do, and breathe, and just notice the sensation in your body. And that's a really nice place to start. I get people to do that 3 times a day to begin with. And there's an audio track they listen to, and it sort of guides them through that process. And eventually you don't need it anymore because you just know how to do it. And you've been there before, and it starts to become this thing of not just, oh, like this is weird and this is unfamiliar. It starts to become, yeah, I can do this. I've done this so many times. Yeah, of course I can sit with this feeling. It's uncomfortable, but I can sit with it. And so changing our relationship with anxiety is the starting point for sure. And then, of course, if we have, other elements going on in our physical body, we do want to address those too. Hormones do play a big impact, especially for women. We're looking at the drop of our progesterone levels in our luteal phase. That's just before we get our period. Often we're experiencing PMS or the more severe PMDD. That can be where you go real black, real dark in those times. It might be, but also PMDD can be more about the length of time. We really notice as soon as you've ovulated, you go into this like drop down, no energy, hate life, hate everything, hate everyone. And then it's only when the period starts that the relief comes in. That's where we're really definitely looking at a hormonal thing. So, tracking your cycles and noticing, is there a correlation here in how the cycle is lining up with the anxiety and the mood shifts? There can be a huge role that our gut plays too. Everyone loves the gut, gut health. It's so fascinating. And so if we have chronic bloating, if we're getting reflux, if we feel like we can't eat anything because all the foods, we react to everything so much, it's not really actually about the food. It's about the gut. Like, why is the gut so sensitive and so reactive to so many foods? The answer is not in, oh my gosh, I need to cut out 10 more foods. The answer is in, let's heal the gut so that it's stronger, so that it can tolerate these foods. A lot of people notice relief when they cut out meat and cut out animal products. Dairy is a common one, and that can be okay. That can be quite tough on our digestive system. But if you're noticing that you feel so much better when you don't eat meat, it's probably because you're not producing enough stomach acid, which happens when we're chronically anxious, to actually break down and digest that meat. So, there's often a reason. And it's kind of like, instead of just cutting out more foods, unless, of course, you've got some ethical reasons and things and your own personal reasons for that. If it's just because my gut feels better when I don't eat meat, there is often an explanation for that. And it's usually coming down to more of the functioning of our digestive system. And of course, there's this two-way street with our gut and our mind, and it influences our anxiety. Will either shut down our whole digestive system, will go into constipation, and just the motility just shuts down, or we'll go the other way and everything kind of comes like extra sensitive, and we'll get diarrhea. You can often get bloating and things like that too. So that's really common with anxiety. But then the other feedback is that our digestive system is our second brain, and it will impact how our primary brain functions too. There's this whole beautiful communication happening between the chemicals in our brain, the chemicals in our digestive system, the way that the gut bacteria interact. And so it's lovely that we can work with that, and we can work with our microbiome and our vagus nerve and support that functioning and it's important, but it's also not the full answer. If we're just doing the gut healing, we're just following this perfect eating plan, we're ignoring our trauma, we're ignoring all of the messages we received from our parents about who we need to be. And they might have done that with love. Like, they might have not meant to put that on you. We all absorbed something. If you have anxiety, there's some stuff from your childhood. Doesn't matter how happy the childhood was either. I always thought I had a happy childhood, and I did, but there's so many things that were there that I just had to suppress and just ignore, and things that I absorbed as well from generations and mindsets and belief systems that aren't actually mine. And we'll all have that, because that's just life, and that's just being a human being. So that's kind of the thing. The only other thing I would mention too is the nutrition side of things too. So we have to look at our blood sugar if we're magnesium deficient. So many of us are. Iron is huge for women too. B vitamins all play a big role in us feeling calm. And the very last thing is our intuition and our connection on a soul level, which, or more of a spiritual understanding of life and where anxiety fits into the picture. I feel like there's an incompletion in our understanding if we go too far into just like clinical and numbers. And I did these tests and the numbers say this. I love testing. I love supplements. You know, it's all great, but ultimately it's like, let's look at this bigger picture of your life and the lessons you're learning and the soul growth and the path that you're on. And when we see things that way, and we have one foot in that bucket as well as one foot in our human bucket, and we're like, oh my God, life's so hard and this is so terrible, but also one foot in the higher perspective, and wow, but I'm learning so much and this is so good for my evolution, and I'm learning what love really is, and I'm learning to step into my power. And even though this is really hard right now, it's creating space in my life for more to come in. Then we can really start to come into this place of harmony within ourselves. It's really powerful for that acceptance piece and surrendering to the journey and all the ups and downs. So yes, that is the journey, and that is the pathway of treatment.
It's so refreshing to hear you speak about how it's not just one way, you know, in regards to the nutrition side of things, the gut health. And too often, as you mentioned, people would come to us and be like, I've tried everything. I've done all the modalities. It's just like, yeah, cool. Like, you've tried quite a bit, but how about doing this? Or how opening up the door to trying something completely different where they haven't experienced that before. And too often people don't realize the connection between our minds and our gut. As you mentioned, if we're constantly anxious, of course we're going to have gut issues. Of course you're going to feel bloated or constipated. Like, it's no coincidence this is happening. Yes, at times, you know, you can have allergies or certain symptoms to foods. However, there's the other side of the spectrum going, cool, like if you're constantly anxious and you're worried and you're upset, then yeah, these symptoms are going to show up in your body unexpectedly. And it's always, as you mentioned, like, you have to have that openness and the surrender to sit with that discomfort and figure out what is actually happening in the mind to be able to go through all that flow. You also mentioned a really good point around the intuition side of things. And I actually had this conversation with a girlfriend of mine yesterday, going how at times we're very strong about knowing when something is up, a body is reacting to it, and we can confide in it. However, some people cannot understand the difference between them listening to their intuition, or is this anxiety? Is this excitement?
Mm-hmm.
And I would love your perspective on this.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I love this question so much because it's a really common one. And it also just, you know, it's been a journey for me as well, trying to figure out, is this my intuition or is this just anxiety and things from the past? And what am I projecting into the now? I would say that we are born with a connection to our intuition. And we are so in tune as little babies. But then what happens is we start to have to make a choice between fitting in and belonging and feeling connected to our family group. And that is a survival thing. Like, we really don't have much of a choice about it. We've got to fit into the group, or being our most authentic selves. And we're going to choose to fit into the family group because our survival needs literally depend on it. So, for example, if my authentic self is, I'm just like, cry and scream my lungs out right now, but my family's uncomfortable about that, my parents and caregivers are uncomfortable with that, I'm going to start suppressing it. And our emotional expression, our authenticity, and our intuition are in the same category, the same area. So we learn to suppress those natural instincts, that natural connection, and we learn to take on this mask of who I need to be in order to be loved and accepted. So the process, and the more that we do the work of deconditioning, pulling out the masks, and this is scary, right? Because that's what's kept us safe. The high achieving personality that I'm super successful and I've got it all together, that's kept us safe. But if we start to pull that back and find out who's underneath, we're going to be able to feel more who you are. Like, you're going to be able to know who you are and what feels good for you. You're going to listen to the signals in your body. You're not going to invalidate and dismiss your own emotional experience. You'll say, you know what? There's sadness here right now, and I'm allowed to feel sad. I'm going to let myself feel sad. There's anxiety here right now. Of course there is. I've had this person in front of me is mirroring that bullying experience I had in high school. So that makes sense. And we can start to be in that space of really letting it be okay for us to just have our own experience. And in that comes the, I've just got this feeling that this is the right thing for me to do. I've just got this feeling that that is not the right way for me to go. I just got this vision of where I need to be, and we follow it and we start to see more and more. And I think it is a journey with this stuff I was raised in a family of lawyers, and everything being based on evidence and logic and argument and being really smart and intelligent. So there is a part of me that's needed the evidence and the testing and the seeing how it all works out. But it's so exciting. Life becomes so fun and magical when you do. And you start to see, wow, when I just follow my heart, when I follow what my intuition's calling me to, magic unfolds. Scary at times, because sometimes I don't even know why I'm doing this thing. And I was just, before we hit record, I was telling you the story about I was traveling for 12 months with my work just recently. And then all of a sudden in June, I thought I was going to keep traveling. I thought I was going to go back to Portugal. I was in communication with friends that I have over there and saying, yeah, I'll see you and I'm going to stay with you. And and then something in my body just felt sick about the idea. I just had enough. And it didn't make logical sense. There was no reason ration to it. It was just what my body was calling me to. And so the next logical step, or the next thing that felt right, was finding a space to be for a period of time, like an extended few months, and maybe start from there, and creating a bit of a nest and a home and having a regular routine. And being in Byron Bay just made sense. It's all the things that I love, but all the conveniences of Australia. It felt really safe. It felt really right. And, even finding a place here, it's a pretty popular place to be. So there's a lot of people saying, oh, you won't find anything. And there's a lot of scarcity around living here. But I just trusted that if I'm meant to be here and I'm feeling the call, it will work out. And lo and behold, of course it did. And so this is, and it's just been the most beautiful thing in my life, and I just felt so right about it. So living from that place and following my heart has become my new normal, and I cannot ignore it anymore. I cannot put those masks back on. Sometimes I go home and I'm with my high school friends and I love them, but there's an old version of Georgie that sometimes I feel this compulsion to kind of put back on, like putting in on jeans that are too tight, that don't fit you anymore. And I just can't do it. And so, I talk about healing and energy and being conscious, and not all of them are into that stuff, but I just don't suppress it anymore. I'm still going to talk like that because that's me, and that's how I live my life, and that's what feels really good for me. So I hope that kind of gives an overview of what this journey can look like and how we can start to feel into it. At the start, it's going to be hard to differentiate between anxiety and intuition, but over time you do start to learn, okay, this is this is like this sick feeling, and it's persistent. Usually that intuition, it's not gonna shift. Like, it'll just keep showing up and whispering until it starts screaming at you, like, do this, go this way, don't do that. And you'll know, because you'll feel the relief and the spaciousness in your heart when you just go with what feels good for you, when you just let yourself do what's right for you, not the forcing, not the pressure, not the what's going to make mum and dad happy on the subconscious level, not what's going to make society celebrate me. It's actually what makes my heart happy. And that's what it takes, following your intuition. And gosh, anxiety just goes quiet when we are living in that space.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to all of that, of the times that I just mistuned my intuition and really sat too much into my anxiety. But like you said, we're all experiencing it very differently, and how we move through it is going to look so different to everyone else. And funnily enough, when you were talking about surrendering and following your heart, I'm sure a lot of listeners would be like, well, I don't know what the fuck that looks like. This does not make any sense to me. It's like, of course it doesn't, because it doesn't need to. It's not logical. It's like more of a inner belief through your body, and like less about the mind. And this is why we're so caught up by achieving the next goal, or perfecting the next morning routine, or whatever it is, like developing like some form of resilience around, or the confidence around anxiety. And you expressed and explained this so well, to make people realize, like, this is the part of life we have to listen to what's actually happening within us to be able to make those changes. And it's not always going to be rainbows and butterflies. It might be a little bit scary. As you mentioned, like that, I love that analogy of the volcano. There's going to be a point where you're actually going to experience burnout or an anxiety attack. And that's going to be like a turning point, going, oh shit, okay, something needs to change, because if not, this is just going to be a reoccurring pattern.
That's it. And if we go further along in that journey, and we do listen to that breakdown moment, you will look back at it. So if anyone's listening to this and you're in that dark phase at the moment, thinking, how the hell am I going to get out of this black hole? There is a future version of you that will look back at this. Should you choose to see this as your spiritual assignment, a lesson, a learning, a turning point in your story, you'll look back at this and be glad it happened. And that's where we really know we've done the healing. It's when you're grateful for the most awful things that have happened in your life. And I know that can really test people and push the boundaries, but there is nothing that you can experience in life that you won't at some point in future, if enough time goes by, because we need to accept things and we need to come to a peace and understanding, and we've got to be human about it and hate it for a while as well, but we will be glad eventually for anything that's happened, or we can find a place of at least extricating some kind of value, some kind of, well, if this didn't happen, then I wouldn't have this beautiful gift in my life. And that's certainly the way I look at something like my parents' divorce now. That was like the worst thing that could have ever happened to me at that time in my life. But now, I mean, I just see all the things that have unfolded since then. I could list probably 100 different things that have unfolded about that are gifts that wouldn't have happened if not for that destruction, that devastation. This is life. We get bushfires coming through, clearing the way, new growth comes through. We see the sprouts of green after that devastation and destruction. It's nature, and it's right. It is the way it's meant to be. We're meant to experience death and loss, and we're meant to grieve it fully, which we often don't do, which makes it so much worse. And then we get the rebirth, and we get the gifts, and we get the opening, expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. So if you're in a contraction, good. You're about to expand. It's going to change. That is natural. That is inevitable. And that's the hope I cling to in those moments. I'm like, oh, I'm in a contraction, but it's going to open up somehow.
And it always does, even as you mentioned, like even at that moment of contraction where you're like deep in that black hole, eventually you can walk or even crawl yourself out of that hole and experience, as you mentioned, like that love and peace. And that's the involvement of life. There's always going to be like the ebb and flow of it. And this is something that I'm very open expressing to my clients, making them realize like right now you might feel that contraction in life, but in a few weeks' time or in a month's time or in a year's time, you're going to feel so much more evolved from that experience. And like you mentioned, like from grief comes the love, and then from love comes more grief. And it's just like the continuous beauty of living.
That's right. That's right. In those, I had a family member pass away recently, my grandfather, and went home to, honor his life. And in the death, there is so much love that comes out. It was a real softening for my family, for everyone's hearts in that moment, and it brings everyone closer together as well. And in the pain, it's just love coming through. So there's something always beautiful about that. And it's not to spiritually bypass. It's not to say, oh, so it's fine, just like I want all my loved ones to die. Like, no, I don't. But I can have one foot in that spiritual perspective and one foot in my human perspective, and there can be some peace and acceptance around it. I lost my beautiful golden retriever who had been in my life for like, how old was he? He was like 12 years old, and he was just gorgeous, Boston, last year. And I was there while he died. We took him to the vet, and it was just his time. And watching them, do the injection and watching life leave his body, there was something, so sacred and beautiful about being present with him as his life transitioned. And, it was sad, but it was just stunning at the same time. And there was some kind of a magic in that too. And I just like, I don't know, life is so beautiful when we can see the beauty in those dark moments, when we're not afraid of that anymore. And anxiety really will call us into that perspective, into, okay, so there's fear here. But what's in that fear? Because if we go deep enough into the fear, we're going to come out the other side and we're going to find love. Love trumps everything. Love is the truth. That is what is beneath any fear. And eventually that is the truth that will all come through. So if you have a fear, explore it, dive into it. You will find some kind of love once you get deep enough into it, if we're brave enough. Feels like jumping off a cliff. It feels like jumping into the unknown, like you're going to die. But then you get to that you land. It's like landing in a feather bed. You realize, wow, it's actually safe. There's actually nowhere to fall. We're always safe. We're always supported.
Such a beautiful way of looking at it. And as you expressing it, I'm like really envisioning me just falling into a bed of feathers, and I'm like feeling like really like warm and like comforted about that. And I hope a lot of the listeners are listening to this and making a few, connections together, that everything happens for a reason. It's leading them to the next step, whether they think logically or irrationally if this is the right way to do things. Georgie, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It has been such a mind-opening, but also on a spiritual level as well. And I know this might sound really fucking woo-woo to some people who don't, practice any spiritual work, and hopefully they'll start by looking at the mind, body, and soul side of things of anxiety. And so, yeah, I want to thank you so much again for your time and expertise today, because I definitely valued it, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have as well.
Oh, thank you so much, C. Just an honor to be able to share. And I feel like we've hopefully, this is valuable for people to listen to. And I hope it's just giving so many people that hope and seeing through the anxiety, the fear. It is an illusion. And the truth is that there is so much love and support for us, even in the scary stuff. And so trust that anxiety, befriend it. And that's what I'll leave everyone with. Thank you.